Welcome, everybody. This is Stacy Christensen with POS Professional Office Services, and I am happy to have you on today's webinar, Putting the Social in Social Media. And before we get started, I just want to test with my co-host, Kylie. Kylie, are you on and able to see and speak?
Yes, I'm here.
Excellent, excellent. We have a fantastic crowd today. We've got people still logging in, so hopefully we'll catch them up as they join us, but we want to be respectful of your time, so we're going to go ahead and get started. A couple housekeeping things. We did mute the line so that everyone can be able to hear and enjoy today's presentations. We encourage you to use the chat feature for any questions that you might have, and at the end of the presentation we will allow time to answer any questions you have. So please feel free to engage with us that way as well. So we'll go ahead and get started. I want to introduce Spinutech. We've got Kylie Skadberg with us today. She is one of their lead client services manager and digital media strategist as well. And Spinutech has been a great partner with POS. They are a digital marketing company based out of Cedar Falls, Iowa, with offices in Chicago and Des Moines. And their areas of expertise really complement what we do here at POS. They live in the digital side of things and specialize in website, search engine optimization, all things paid search, digital search, social media, and the like. So we like to co-partner with them from time to time and bring you relevant content, so I'm thrilled to have her today. I will go ahead and do a few introductory slides to kind of set the stage, and then I'm going to turn it over to Kylie. So social media, what we're talking about today is really that patient engagement, the new digitally empowered patient. You know, it's no secret that there is a growing popularity among all consumers, but especially businesses. And for a long time, healthcare was slow to adapt to the whole digital scene, and they've really come a long way. And part of that is because there's an increasingly growing popularity of social media among healthcare. And part of that is because so many patients are now going online to manage their health, to get educated about their health, and there's a lot of engagement going on with social media. And so healthcare really needs to figure out how can we really use social media you know, to show the human side of who we are and have some social engagement, but at the same time use it as a valuable educational tool as well. So, you know, one of the misperceptions is that people think it's just young people. You know, we hear a lot of medical practices tell us, well, yeah, but, you know, our older population, you know, they still want us to mail them and phone them and things like that. And you can see here that's just really not the case anymore. I mean, those individuals 65 and plus, 50 to 64, they're online. They're online more than we think. And we don't want that to be an excuse anymore as to why we shouldn't have multiple communication touches. And any good marketer knows that a good communication strategy is to have a nice combination of digital and traditional marketing so that you're hitting those people multiple times with multiple different communication tools. You know, more patients, I mentioned, are engaging online to manage their health. A recent stat I saw showed that more than 20% of patients with chronic diseases really use different online forums and social media forums to, you know, engage with others with like conditions. You know, whether that's more of a chat forum or to gain education from providers out there on how to best manage their health. And so that's a growing use as well. You know, social media, even though our title was putting the social back into social media, it can really be a really good way to educate your patients too. And so Pricewaterhouse had done a study a while back, and some of their stats showed that 70% of patients really appreciate getting appointment reminders and referrals and having that come through social media channels as well. And really seeking out second opinions as well, that, you know, basic social media posts and listening to what other patients and healthcare providers are saying sort of influence where they want to go. So be thinking about your social media channels, not just to show your fun human side, but also how you can use it to educate patients too. These were just some interesting statistics that I wanted to show on how some of the larger health systems are engaging with social media. And again, I had said healthcare has been one of the slowest to adapt. But we've got about 26% of the hospitals using some sort of form of social media. YouTube traffic continues to increase. And when you think about that, that makes a lot of sense because so many medical practices and their websites now include videos about whether it's their providers, their practice in general, patient review videos, videos about new services, new treatments, procedures, things like that. It really allows the patient firsthand to kind of have that engagement as well. And another part of social media that I know Kylie she'll touch on it a little bit is the whole online reviews. You really can think about online reviews as social media channels as well. And, patients are a post or tweet away from telling you what they think. And they usually want to tell you what they think when they've had a negative experience. There was a study a while back that showed that a bad experience and a lost patient can cost practices up to $150,000 in lost revenue a year. And so feedback matters. And a lot of medical practices are really trying to be more proactive now in gaining that patient feedback and asking for patients to tell them what they're thinking so that they can get those good reviews. And so don't forget, as you're sort of listening to today's presentation, it's not enough to just build your social media channels and to build your online review channels, but you need to promote them. You need to be telling patients that you do want to connect with them, that you do want to hear from them, and that can be done in the form of, leave behind cards, rack cards at the front desk, and a thank you card mailed to the patient. Just make sure that you're really doing your job and trying to promote as well. This is the part where I invite our specialist, Kylie, to come in and share the rest of today's presentation, and she's going to give a really nice high-level overview, and then we'll take questions at the end. So, Kylie, welcome, and I turn it over to you.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Stacy, and thank you for having me. So I know we're talking primarily about social media today, but we're also going to talk a little bit about reviews and what your online reputation says about you. Obviously, everyone knows that prospective patients are using the internet to find out who they're going to see from a doctor standpoint. And it's Google is really placing a lot of prominence on the reviews. So you can see that right here where those little stars are over on the local pack, which is what they call that little map and picture over on the right. They're placing a lot more emphasis on reviews now because they know that that's third-party credibility that adds to Google search results. But it's also about social media and what people are saying there. As Stacy mentioned, usually when people have a bad experience, that's the first place they go. So I just kind of wanted to set this presentation up just by saying, yes, social media is important. Yes, reviews are important. But it's really everything that's online that patients and prospective patients and people are saying about you that you need to be thinking about. And there's lots of tools that can help you kind of manage your reputation and make sure that you're addressing what needs to be addressed. And we won't get into that too much today, but it really is a big world out there. So we're going to kind of eat the elephant bite by bite. So we'll start just by talking a little bit about reviews. So obviously everyone knows that reviews are important. I know that you have done other presentations specifically about reviews and how to get them. So we won't spend too much time on reviews today. But it used to be people, took word of mouth recommendations. Hey, what doctor do you see? What pediatrician do you go to? Now that's going to reviews. People are taking the opinions of total strangers to say, okay, that doctor seems like a good doctor. That practice seems like they're getting good reviews online. So there's a lot of stock that's put into reviews, both from a prospective patient standpoint, but also from a search engine standpoint, as I mentioned, how Google is making them more prominent. So I think a lot of people, especially healthcare organizations, want to shy away from reviews. I know a lot of you probably use Trustamy or some sort of patient satisfaction Surveys and those are important, but not as visible online as something like Google or WebMD or ZocDoc or things like that. So it is important to pay attention to those because people are using those to make decisions about their health care. Moving on to a few stats about social media. So obviously, I've been in social media a long time. 10 plus years ago, people were saying, oh, our customers aren't on social media. Oh yeah, a lot of people are using it, but that's probably going to be, short term. And I think we all can agree, social media is here to stay. So either you better get on board or figure out what you're going to do to combat that, because people are using social media as well to make decisions about their health care. And again, these are just some stats that kind of illustrate how patients are using social media. 80% of internet users search for health information and are seeking out information on a specific doctor. I see it all the time on social media. I just moved to Des Moines. Can somebody tell me a good doctor to see for my kids, or things like that. So reviews are happening in a different form on social media. So in terms of where to start, I usually talk to my clients about being realistic. I know it can be overwhelming and it can be a big job, just depending on your organization. Some of you might have a few people in your marketing department. Some of you might not even have a marketing department. So just being realistic with what resources you have and what you can and can't do is where you need to start. If you have one person trying to tackle a million different things and also have them run social media, it doesn't make sense for you to try to do YouTube and LinkedIn and Facebook and Instagram. It just doesn't make sense. So first and foremost, be realistic with yourself and with your organization in terms of what you can and can't accomplish. I'll talk a little bit more about content in a little bit, but content is another really important consideration in terms of where do I start with what platforms, what channels, what kind of resources do you have to create content? Because while it's okay to share third-party content and kind of leverage some things that other people are doing, what makes you unique? That's really why people will follow you on social media. So you need to think a lot about and be realistic about what kind of content you can create for social media. Other important considerations include just thinking about your demographic. If your demographic trends older, you're probably going to want to look a little harder at Facebook. Obviously, Facebook's the most widespread channel, so that's probably going to be a part of your social media strategy anyway, but maybe you don't need to worry about Instagram if it trends a little older. If you're really trying to go after the millennials, you're probably going to want to look a little harder at Instagram. So who is your target audience, and kind of custom tailor your strategy based on that. You should also think about, as I mentioned, just sharing consistently in terms of content. So some of that can be sourced, but some of it should be content that you create. So plan on content-heavy channels like Facebook. You're going to need more articles, more blog posts, more videos, more things like that, which are a little bit more time-intensive than, say, Twitter, which you can just kind of throw up a picture and some tweets here and there, and that's enough. And then really, in terms of frequency and how often to do it, we'll get into a little bit more channel-specific best practices. But you have to be consistent. You can't tweet one day and then 3 weeks later you decide to tweet again. Once you make up your mind to do social and do it right, you need to be consistent and you need to test things out. What does your audience respond to? If we post it at 7 a.m. on a Saturday, do we get a lot of reactions versus 7 p.m. on a Friday? Those are all things that you need to kind of learn as you go, but start with some of the best practices and some of the basics. So in terms of what platforms are used for what, really the most primary platforms that I see healthcare organizations using is Facebook, obviously. Facebook is a great place for things like what type of services you offer, educational type content about those services, community building, so what are you doing to connect with the community that you're in, and customer care. And I'll talk a little bit about HIPAA, kind of the dirty word of social media and healthcare. But it is going to be used as a platform for customer care. That's just the nature of social media. Twitter is going to be a little bit more real-time, like news industry updates, if there's like an outbreak of something or if there's weather-related closings, those types of real-time news and information, that type of stuff is better suited for Twitter. YouTube, obviously, everybody's pretty familiar with YouTube. I mean, that's really awareness. Reviews can be a little tricky. You know, if people are actually doing reviews on YouTube about your practice, there's good and bad ways to take advantage of that or leverage that. LinkedIn is going to be more geared toward recruiting. Obviously, you know, most patients are not going to go to LinkedIn to try to find out details about a specific doctor. They might, but that's not what your content there should be used for. So those are the primary channels that we focus most on. Secondary platforms, and again, this has to go back to what are your resources like? You know, do you have someone who can capture photos and who can create graphics on Pinterest? But if you have the capacity, these two are great platforms for healthcare organizations. Instagram is going to be more visual, inspirational. I like to use it as sort of a behind the scenes, showing the face of your organization, the people that run it every day and who make patients happy. And it's got to be visual and high quality photos. Pinterest, obviously, it's going to be more educational. A client of mine just did something recently, when to use ibuprofen versus Tylenol. So something like that where it's an infographic or a chart, that type of material is perfect for Pinterest. So in terms of best practices, I'm going to get into the weeds a little bit here, and I know Stacy will share this out afterwards so you guys can kind of use this as a resource. But this is just going to be best practices by the channel. You know, you have to do what works for you. The best place to start is by looking at your Facebook page insights. And when are your fans online? How old are they? What kind of content are they engaging with? But if you really don't know where to start, this is a great place to start. So you should be posting up to 14 times a week. Obviously, again, resources. Sometimes that's not feasible. But the more you can post, the better. Timing, typically like during the middle of the workday, is going to be the best for people. Obviously, you're not wanting to necessarily post at 3 a.m. And then those days, again, they're just based on best practices, industry agnostic, when most people are online on Facebook. Unique platform features for Facebook, live videos. Obviously, Facebook is really prioritizing live video these days, so you'll see a lot of people just doing these live videos. I know that can get a little tricky, but you know, some things with like interviews with doctors or things like that would be a great opportunity. Anything like if you have like a medical spa or something like that, that type of content is easily doable from a live video standpoint, something that's not too personal for people. You have events and groups, and then you have obviously very sophisticated targeting capabilities from an advertising standpoint. So just some do's and don'ts. Short, engaging captions. You don't need to write a novel in your Facebook post. And don't share the same post within a short period of time. I think it's a misconception for a lot of people that once I share one piece of content, I can't share it again. Most of the time, with organic reach on Facebook being what it is, most of the time people aren't even going to see it unless you're sponsoring it or boosting it. So it's good practice to make sure that you're reposting pieces of content, whether it's video or a blog article or something like that. It's good practice to repost those several times over the course of the next few weeks or months, just to kind of get as much mileage out of it as you can. But you don't want to share something at 11 a.m. and then 2 p.m. share it again. That's just going to kind of irritate people. You'll want to update your cover channel photo or your channel cover photo. That's that big image at the top. You want to make sure that you change that out frequently, and that could be seasonal or correspond with the big campaign that you have going on. And you don't want it to be too salesy. People want to come and connect with you on social media to see the human side of your business, see the people, see that you're relatable. They don't want to be pushed, you know, oh, we've got this special, or, you know, that would probably be more specific to sort of like aesthetic type stuff. But don't push things down their throat. Just let them get to know you as a brand. That's what you're trying to do there. So for Twitter, I think this is a channel that a lot of companies can neglect a little bit, just because it can get overwhelming to maintain, just with the real-time nature of it. But you don't have to do a lot to maintain a Twitter channel. 7 posts per week, I mean, that's 1 tweet per day. That's not a lot. those are best practices in terms of timing and days again. And the unique features for Twitter, you can do polls. What are you guys interested in? And then this is really where hashtags become relevant. I have a lot of clients ask about hashtags on Facebook, and they really don't work on Facebook. Twitter and Instagram is where they're going to work the best. So if you really want to market a hashtag, this would be the place to do it. Do's and don'ts. Frequently repurpose your content. So again, Twitter is so fast moving that you could post something at 8 a.m. and over half your audience wouldn't have seen it. And they're not going to go to your Twitter feed to read through all of your old posts. So it's okay to repurpose content. Text-only tweets kind of are a don't. You can do it, but you want to include some sort of link with visual. That's what makes your Twitter stream engaging. That's what's going to get attention. There's a whole nother topic I could go into about influencers and engagement on social media. So we think about social media and we think about what people are how people are talking to us directly. But there's a whole other side of social media where it really involves thought leaders, partners, engaging with them, making yourself more visible through their networks. We have a gal at SUNY Tech who specializes in influencer partner relationships, so identifying bloggers and people who are influential both on a micro and macro level. And so I think that's a whole nother conversation, but it really is about engagement. So retweeting people and responding and just engaging in the conversation that is applicable to your organization. YouTube, again, I probably don't have to go into too much detail on what YouTube is used for. Some of the best things that I have seen, and I know this is challenging for healthcare organizations because of the schedules of doctors and medical professionals, it can be tough. But anytime you can get the doctors or the providers in front of the camera and get them to talk about an area that they're specializing in, for example, a pediatrician talking about germs or flu season or why flu shots are important, those are great opportunities to put video up on your YouTube that are highly searchable. I mean, YouTube is like the second biggest search engine, so it's important that you don't neglect that and leverage it as much as you can. They don't have to be super high quality, very well produced videos. Sometimes just using a basic DSL camera is enough for that. So Twitter cards to drive consumer engagement. Don't forget to add your videos to playlists rather than just have all of your videos on your channel just kind of haphazardly. And do make sure that you fill out the keywords in your titles, descriptions, and tags so that those keywords are the search engine rich content that gets you found for certain topics. LinkedIn, again, this is more recruitment based. Obviously, a lot of you are probably familiar with LinkedIn, but there's a lot of different things you can do from a LinkedIn standpoint from recruitment. But again, I think that's probably another topic for another day. But I think the key thing here is groups. There's a lot of healthcare-oriented groups, and then just advertising by job title. Instagram and Pinterest, like I mentioned, are probably more secondary channels if you have the capacity to do them. Instagram is going to be more visual, focusing on high-quality photos, visually engaging photos, and again, I like to use it for more behind the scenes. With Instagram stories now, there's a lot of opportunity to do more quote-unquote live video, more engaging video that I'm seeing a lot more advertisers do. They just opened up the Facebook ad platform, so you can run ads in Instagram stories now, which is a great new feature. But again, really, it's got to be visual and it's got to be engaging. I see a lot of clients who just post pictures of their staff standing in a line smiling at the camera, and it's great to show the human side of your business, but it has to be more interesting and more engaging than that. So again, just keep in mind low quality photos. You don't want real low quality photos. You should have a consistent presence on Instagram. Everything should kind of feel the same. Do engage on Instagram. That's a great place to do that. Comment on other people's photos, mention people, tag people, especially within your community. That's a great way to kind of build relationships there. And for Pinterest, again, Pinterest is the channel where you really have to be all in on content, and I almost feel like you need some sort of graphic designer, someone with some graphic experience in either on your team or with your agency, just to fully utilize Pinterest. It's got to be visual. You can't just really have like a one picture and then talk about an article that you wrote. It's got to be visual for people in order for people to kind of connect with you. But a lot of opportunity, especially if you have educational type content like the Tylenol versus Advil that I mentioned. That type of content performs really well on Pinterest, so if you have the capacity to do it, by all means you should. In terms of a paid ad strategy, it really should be three-pronged. And if people are questioning where do we start, we always say everything that you do from an ad standpoint should hark back to your business objectives. So what are you trying to do from a business standpoint? Do you need more visibility in your community? Do you need more engagement? Are you trying to drive patient intake? Whatever it is, that should play a role in your paid ad strategy. And specifically, we're talking about Facebook, really, because that's the most robust platform for advertising. That does extend into Instagram. We don't do a ton of like Twitter advertising, really. LinkedIn, we will do some if we're looking for specific recruitment type positions. And then we do a lot of YouTube advertising too, but again, that goes back to what the objective is. If awareness is your objective, then it's branded stuff. It's touchy-feely videos about your organization and what you're about. If you're trying to drive traffic, then it would be content-based likely. So do you have educational content on your site that you're trying to get people back to? Do you have a new doctor that you're trying to ramp up that you want people to learn more about? Those types of things are going to drive back to your site. And then for conversions and remarketing, that's really like getting people to call and schedule an appointment. So that content's going to be a little bit more hard hitting. So remarketing is when people have visited your site and didn't complete an action, such as calling a phone number, or if you have the option to schedule online or something like that. If they didn't complete that action, they can be remarketed to on social media. And that's like, if you look at things in terms of a funnel, that's the lowest funnel you can go because they've indicated high intent that they're interested in your practice and scheduling an appointment or whatever you want that action to be. So again, that's really going to be more hard hitting. It's going to be schedule now, or really the value proposition of what you're all about. And there's a note here just about testing. So I think it's important, especially with social media when things change so quickly, not to set it and forget it. You should always be testing different images, different ad types, different ways of reaching your prospective customers to see what's performing the best. In terms of content, I feel like if you're not doing any sort of content right now, you need to be. You need to be thinking about how you can create content. That is the way that things are going for a lot of industries. Online, 100%. If you ask Google what the most important thing is from a search engine standpoint, they will tell you it's content and it's links back to your site. And that plays a huge role when you talk about social media. So if you don't have a blog, think about getting a blog. How can you internally recruit providers to be able to provide you with information for the blog? Again, that's a topic for a whole other day in terms of what to write about. But really, if it's relevant to the prospective patient, if it's relevant to the everyday consumer, it's relevant to search engines, and it should be relevant to you. So we're not necessarily looking for medical journal content. We're looking for anything that the customer is going to, or prospective patient is going to be finding interesting. Photos, find someone who can take photos internally, make them that owner of that content, and get them out there. Get them talking to providers. Get them talking to patients if it's in the waiting room and you have their consent. Again, that's one of the things to watch out for, is always make sure, as you guys are all probably very well aware of, just to make sure that consent is provided in any sort of testimonial or picture opportunity. But all of that is super valuable because, again, it's the third-party credibility that you need as an organization to vouch for you. See, these people come to us, they trust us, and they're telling you about it. And videos, again, if you have the capacity to take videos, they are so valuable. All the social media channels are really prioritizing them. And so what that means for you is anytime you post a video, more people are going to probably see that video than if it was just a link. So watch outs, obviously. I probably don't have to get too much into that. But anytime medical information or personal information is shared, you have to be careful about that, which brings me to my next slide in terms of moderation. I would advise, and I do advise all my clients, to have a social media policy on their website if they don't already, and to work with their legal counsel to make sure that they have a very clear list of things that they can and can't address online. Anytime any personal information is shared, that should always be taken offline. And I recommend that you have a list of canned responses to known sensitive topics. If someone is upset about the care that they received, you need to be able to answer that in a fashion that doesn't confirm or deny that they're a patient, that type of thing. And you can work with your legal counsel to develop that language. But aside from those personal conversations, there's a lot of opportunity for engagement on social media. You can like someone's comment when they say, I love Dr. Smith, or thank you so much for being great in the community, or different things like that. And you can correspond with people on positive content in a way that's not a personal, medically related topic. Yeah, and definitely, you should, within your social media policy, have guidelines about what you will and will not allow. So if there's, people talking about things that are completely inappropriate, you can certainly take that down. As long as your social media policy kind of dictates, we won't allow these types of things, whether it's firearms or violence or whatever it is. You can probably Google, social media policies out there, and you can get an example of 500 of them that you could custom tailor for yourself. As long as you can point to that and say, this is why we don't allow that, then you're totally within your right to do that. Yeah, and just having a more personal relationship with your fans, that's really why they come to you on social media, is to get more information about what's behind the curtain, and they obviously probably in most cases have a personal relationship with their doctor, and it's important to represent that clinic or organization-wide. In terms of measurement, so I get a lot of questions from CMOs and CEOs about where's the ROI? How can we prove that this is directly contributing? And I usually answer with, well, you can't. And it's not a real popular answer, but the fact is you can measure engagement, and you can measure that in a lot of different ways that might not necessarily be directly correlated to appointments or ROI. But I kind of compare it to a relationship or a friendship. You have to build a relationship with someone. And so you do that through providing them with content that's helpful for them and letting them see a little bit about you from a personal standpoint. And you have to build that relationship so when the time comes for them to either refer or to decide what doctor to go to, they're going to think of you because they already have a relationship with you. And that at its core is what social media does for you as an organization. And I don't care if you're healthcare or anything else, that really is what you're trying to do on social media. So when people question the importance of it or the ROI of it, I always kind of relate it back to that, because you do have to have a relationship with people in order for them to feel like they can trust you. That said, there are other ways that you can measure your efforts. So follower count, which isn't my most favorite way of measuring it because I think it's very superficial. I much more prefer looking at platform engagement. So I usually look at that in terms of how many followers do I have, what is my reach, and then what does my engagement look like? Because you have to kind of look at it combined to really get the big picture. Top performing content, what are people responding to? If it's mostly internal stuff, then you tend to think, okay, well, it's probably a lot of people who work for our organization that are engaging, and how can you reach out to patients a little bit more and gear your content toward a little bit more patient focus. In terms of post reach and engagement, that's again how many people are seeing your content, and then ad conversions, how many people are clicking and going to your website, and ad relevance score, just how relevant is the content that you're sharing to the audience that you're sharing it to. So there's a lot of different ways that you can measure content, and I think that it's important to evaluate your business objectives and how social media relates back to your business objectives, and that is how you tailor your measurements accordingly. It's no one-size-fits-all, unfortunately. And again, if you just look at follower count, it's probably not going to do a whole heck of a lot for you. So it really has to be, what are we trying to do as a business, and then tailor your measurements and the metrics that you look at accordingly. Because there really is a lot of ways to measure your effectiveness of your social media, and it differs by channel. So figure out what your business objectives are, figure out what your marketing objectives are, and then you can kind of craft your metrics from there. So that is kind of what I have. I think we have a little bit of time. Stacy can correct me if I'm wrong, a little bit of time for questions. If anyone has any questions for me or Stacy.
Absolutely. Thank you so much. So that was a lot of information, a lot of really, really good information to digest. And one of the questions is, where do you start? So if you don't have a social media platform today, or one that is sort of underperforming, which is the best to start with, and your recommendation on that, Kylie?
Yep. I usually say Facebook. I know that just depending on the demographic, people have differing opinions about what's the most popular. Facebook is the most widely used. It has the biggest numbers, and it has the best targeting. So I usually say start with Facebook. Plus, with Facebook, you also get access through their ad platform if you're doing ads as well to Instagram. So I feel like, at least from an ad standpoint, you can kind of kill two birds with one stone and hit the millennials and also hit a little bit older demographic. But in terms of sheer volume, that is the biggest, and that's where I would start.
Great. Lisa's asking, for social measurement, what would you say is a good engagement level, using Instagram as an example? Say an account has 100 followers, is getting 40 to 50% interactions, kind of like likes or comments. Is that a good percentage? Do you have any sort of benchmark there, Kylie?
No, I don't have a benchmark. I can follow up with that. But I would say you really have to kind of gauge what kind of interactions you're getting. I've seen channels with 10,000 followers, and they'll get maybe a couple comments, and that's not good. That's why, again, I don't necessarily like to just look at follower count, because I think engagement's much more reflective of your audience and how they're participating and engaging in conversation with you. I would say, just off the cuff, a 40 to 50% interaction engagement rate is good. If you're basically engaging 50%, even though it's 100 people, if you're engaging basically 50% of your followers, that's a good sign.
Okay.
I would say anything over, if you're getting anything over 20% engagement, just given the reach, especially on Facebook, organic reach declines all the time. And so what that means is you can post something, and there's no guarantee that everyone who follows you is going to see it, just based on the way that Facebook algorithms work and the way that they optimize content for every single person based on the content, a ton of different factors. So knowing that organic reach is fairly low, if you're getting anything over a 20% engagement rate, I would say that that's pretty good.
Excellent. Marissa is asking, any tips on how to get providers in the practice on board for making videos and contributing to content? That's an excellent question. We get that a lot.
Yep, and I do feel your pain on that. We have a couple healthcare clients, and I know that provider schedules are so crazy. The suggestions that I have given them are try to do some sort of cattle call or coincide it with some sort of lunch or board meeting or something where you're going to have a lot of them there. Ask them to come, and in timed increments, 10 minutes early, so you can just capture a couple of videos. Obviously, lunchtime is going to be a time when you can maybe get after some of them, or late in the day or early mornings, so when they don't have a packed schedule. So I would try to do it then, or try to do it at events. Like if, for example, you go to like a heart walk, and there's a cardiologist there at the heart walk. He's going to be a little bit more casual because he's at the heart walk and he's not working. So try to get him to speak to something related to cardiology. I get it. It's super hard. And I think content is even harder, because when it comes to content, you have to think about getting them to not think about medical terms and think about it the way the layman person talks. And the example that I gave to a board recently was, how many times do you have a patient come into your office and tell you that I've self-diagnosed myself? I know exactly what's wrong with me. And one of the doctors says, I think the better question is, how often does that not happen? And so I think if you use an analogy like that and say, how many people are searching online for, I have a problem with blue veins on my leg? They don't know that those are spider veins or whatever the medical term is. They just know they have a problem. So when you gear your content toward what they perceive to be the problem, that's where you intercept them. So you have to get them away from thinking about medical terms. It's not a medical journal. Most of the people don't know the medical term for anything. So when you think about it that way, it helps get them on board a little bit, because then they understand from the point of view of the patient.
Absolutely. These are great questions. We'll keep going for a couple more minutes. If people have to leave, we understand. This is a great one about Facebook and boosting posts. We get that a lot with our account too, where you're solicited to pay for boosting a post.
Yes.
If this pediatric practice chose to do so, how long do you suggest you keep the paid advertisement, and is it really good to boost the post?
It is good to boost the post. Usually it only costs a couple dollars per day, and I would usually recommend you do it for like 3 to 5 days. So not too long, but I would make sure that the content that you're boosting is valuable, because that's going to be, for maybe some people, it might be maybe their first interaction with you and seeing your content. So make sure it's not just like a happy 4th of July. Make sure it's like, do you know the difference between, you know, I don't know, is it important to get a flu shot in 2018? Something like that people are going to find valuable. So if you're going to spend the money on it, do it on something that people are actually going to find valuable.
Excellent. What about consent? Gaining consent to, you know, use a patient, maybe in a special promotion. You know, a practice is saying that they do some giveaways from time to time. And, you know, what if you wanted to get kind of a live video shot or include your patients? What sort of consent is enough consent?
That's a good question. If you're going to do some sort of testimonial or something that features a patient specifically, I would have your counsel, your legal counsel, draft up a consent document for them to sign. If you're just, say you're at like a heart walk and you're taking a live video, no consent's needed because you're in a public place. If they were to get on camera and say, I'm a patient and I love it, you might want to just ask them, like, hey, is it okay if we use like your video? Would you mind signing this paper? Whatever. But generally when you're in a public place, consent is kind of waived in the sense that, you know, obviously if a doctor came up to somebody in a public place and said, hey, you're my patient, can I videotape you? Like, that's not appropriate. But if you're at like a heart walk and someone volunteers, that's absolutely allowed. I would say anything that's within the practice and you're highlighting someone specifically or taking pictures, you need consent for that.
Good point. And just a closing comment, you know, Lori made a good point here in a comment to us, you know, that we didn't really mention the importance of health grades when it comes to online reviews, and that is kind of a separate session in and of itself, and absolutely, I mean, health grades, Rate My MD, ZocDoc, Google reviews, etc., all very important engagement tools for practices to solicit provider reviews, and certainly that's a social measurement as well, and a topic that we've written about and could have a whole webinar just on that session, but certainly a very important tool when it comes to reviews as well. So we have exceeded our time. It's been a pleasure. This is one of my favorite things to do. I love connecting with practices around the country. A little bit about POS for those of you who might be new to our company. So we're a healthcare communications company. We really, you know, work with practices on their marketing strategies and help them reach patients in the best way, whether that's through the printed word, you know, through messaging, also help with patient payment services and the like. If you ever need anything, we have reps throughout the country, and certainly my email and phone is always available. And I told you about Spinutech at the beginning. Kylie would certainly entertain, any more questions, or they do a lot of strategy work as well and a lot of social media marketing work too. So we will send you the recording. We'll send you the PDF files as well. It was a great webinar. We thank you all for taking the time with us today, and a special thank you to you, Kylie.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. Thanks, everyone.
All right. Have a great day, everybody. Bye-bye.